Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Honor School's Fall 2023 Research Conference. I am Jennifer Ross, the Acting Dean of the Honor School, and it is wonderful to see such a great crowd today because this is, for us, basically our Super Bowl, or the World Cup title, or CAA championship game. If you will, you can choose your favorite option there. I learned the importance of today about a year ago. And this is so important because this is a culmination of all the work that our students do throughout their time here at Monmouth University. And we look forward to today because it's a way for them to showcase all that they have done. I began my journey at Monmouth University on December 7th, 2022. And I only started that day because Dean Mezzi, our retired Honor School Dean, who has joined us here today, wanted me to attend last fall's research conference. I had other intentions. I wanted a little bit more time off in between jobs. I planned to start the following week. But I took Dean Mezzi's advice, and like many of you in this room who have also taken Dean Mezzi's advice, I am very glad that I did. So on day 3 at Monmouth, I was sitting in the back of this room, and I witnessed my very first Honor School research conference. And I was completely and utterly impressed by the scholarship and the research and the passion and the creativity and the true breadth of knowledge that our students showcase today. But that day, it was as if I had just flipped to the last chapter of a book. And I think this group may appreciate that analogy more than every other group today. But it's like I'd read the last chapter of a book. I knew how our Honor School story ended for our students, but I had no idea how we got here. So I've spent the last year reading that book, and like a very good English major that I once was, I have done so with a fine-tooth comb and underlined and highlighted and annotated. And I have learned a lot about what they do to get to this moment. And I have a much more profound appreciation for what our students here have accomplished. What you have done as undergraduate students is nothing short of impressive. The Honor School thesis is a culmination of the content that our students have engaged with and studied at Monmouth University. The projects they're presenting today are all their own. They have come up with this topic through coursework and conversations. For many, the thesis allows them to explore an area beyond their curriculum. For others, it allows them to find the commonalities between their two majors. For some, it gives them a chance to delve into their degree content in more depth. And for all, it provides a rewarding challenge. But it is a challenge. Our students will spend, at minimum, about a year working on this project, though many of our students do choose to extend their timeline and delve deeper into their work. They take a semester in our HO 396 course to find 25 supporting scholarly sources and write a literature review. Today, they're going to talk to you about what they did in HO 496, which is their final class, where they use their research toward something. And that something varies. I have spent a lot of time throughout this past year talking with Honor School students, and almost always we talk about the Honor School thesis. This is something that is on their mind frequently, something they worry about a lot. We always get to this topic. And when I talk about it, I reference a lot of what I witnessed a year ago, and I find myself using very vague terminology, because as you'll see today, there is no one right way to do this. Our students are allowed to take their research and use it in a way that most benefits them. Today, in this session, we are going to learn how to enrich the music education experience. We're going to see a student-written memoir, hear an analysis of intersectional identities in Nella Larsen's work, and we'll see an analysis of the visual novel. So you can see my struggle. This is a very large range of interests. And that's the fun part here. You can choose what most excites you and explore it. But to get to today, it does take a lot of work. And at the beginning of this journey, it is pretty daunting. In the middle, I'm sure our students have had some self-doubt and asked, why on earth am I doing this? But you've made it, you've gotten to today, and I hope that you can see why this journey had meaning. And I hope you see the value in the experience, and most importantly, I hope today you have a great sense of pride for what you've accomplished. Today is our Super Bowl because today doesn't happen for everybody. Statistically, only 40% of students nationwide who start in an honor school or program will graduate from that honor school or program. So today, we are in some very rarefied air. All of this is not possible without a lot of help. And first and foremost, that comes from our professors. One of the very unique things that we do in the Honor School is that our students have the opportunity to work directly, one-on-one, with a professor of their choosing. They use that professor throughout their 396 and 496 process to help them navigate the proposal, the research, and the project itself. Our professors share their knowledge and expertise with our students so they can get the best possible thesis experience. I want to thank our professors on behalf of the Honor School for all of your expertise, your willingness to work with our students, the time you've invested in them. We cannot have today and a lot of what we do with the Honor School without you. So will you please take a moment to thank our professors. An honor school is only as successful as the support it receives from around the university, and we are fortunate that our administrative staff, deans, and faculty support the mission of the honor school. This is most prevalently seen in our Honors Council, which is made up of professors from across the university to assist the dean and the honor school. Their input and work has been vital. Their dedication this year and throughout their time and tenure to honors education has allowed our school to be as successful as it is. This is also a good time to remind our presenters today that they will receive an email from me on the 18th with an application to apply for the Honors Council Award for Best Thesis. Though there is one person in particular I do want to take a second to recognize, and that is Doris Meyer, the assistant to the dean. She does so much planning for the honor school, so much work to keep us moving forward, and all of today is certainly orchestrated by her efforts. Even more so throughout this past semester, she has been a great help and vital asset to all we do with the honor school. So a thank you very much to Doris Meyer. I am excited to get this session of all sessions started because, as I told them in the hallway, we got a lot of English majors here, and that's my area of expertise is the English and the writing. So I'm excited to hear what we have today, but a few housekeeping items before we begin. For one, if you have not yet done so, you'll see a QR code here. If you scan that, that will take you to our program. It has a lot more details with abstracts, titles, first readers, our whole overview of the day. There are a few scattered around the room as well, should you need. And I do want to thank our sophomore and maybe resident graphic design artist in the honor school, Gina Deej, for doing the work to design and organize our program. I also ask that you take a minute to silence your phones if you've not done so already. And just a reminder that we are recording our session. There's a camera in the back of the room where we will be posting this to our honor school website in the near future. Although I'm assuming there'll be some recording today as people present, and that's certainly welcome. Each one of our students will be up here. They will have the floor to present, and we will follow that with a 2-minute Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask when they've concluded. I hope that all of you here have a very similar experience to what I had about a year ago. It's a very exciting day for all of our students. So I thank you for coming, and I will introduce our very first presenter. Elena Wharton is a music major with a concentration in music industry. She is going to be presenting her research working with first reader Dr. Jonathan McElroy.
Hi everyone, my name is Elena Wharton. I'm a music major with a concentration in music industry, and I completed a creative capstone project called Enriching the Music Education Experience. And the culminating result was this booklet right here. It's a quick resource for music educators, largely based on the research that I completed in the HO 396 course. So let's get into it, shall we? My research question: when music programs see declines in engagement, how can the interest in learning music be restored? So here's the reasoning as to why I wanted to study this. Music education has had a large impact on my life through elementary school, middle school, high school. It's pretty much made me who I am today. I love music, and especially my high school music program definitely left an impact on me between the friendships that I made and how I grew as a musician, all the things that I've learned, just really fueled that passion. And when my band director, he worked at the school for 20 years, he retired, and they were considering cutting a percussion class. And the band parents were not happy about that. They banded together, and just seeing that amount of passion really showed me how important music education is in schools. And I believe that students should have as strong music education as possible because it could really impact their lives. So my research was mainly to find classroom tactics that are proven effective to strengthen music programs, and I largely looked at the Leonard Bernstein Music Method Education Model, and I have a few quotes that I thought really aligned with the research that I was going for, that students should be excited and personally involved in creating music, that music education should be enjoyable, positive, and aesthetically pleasing, and that students should gain knowledge, skills, and a positive disposition to music. And there are 3 themes that emerged from my research, which are well-being, motivation, and relevance. So first we have well-being, and this is divided into 2 subcategories. The first one is mental well-being. Music educators can really have an impact on a student's learning, and sometimes it is proven that students can experience a bit of stress when they're learning about music, and it's not necessarily about the content. Sometimes it's about the teaching style itself. So introducing autonomy into the curriculum can really help, and that kind of means giving students an opportunity to take more control over their education, like something along the lines of teaching or guiding warm-ups. And also sometimes students feel mentally or physically fatigued when they're practicing music, so assessing them on proper technique could help with this as well. A topic that I looked into was fuzzy logic, which is a system of reasoning and computation in which the objects of reasoning and computation are classes with unsharp or fuzzy boundaries. And basically, there was this study that was saying that music can impact a student's mood. So for example, if you are noticing that your students might be feeling a bit tired or underwhelmed, playing some upbeat music when they walk into the classroom might help out with that sort of thing, kind of setting the vibe for what the students are going to be experiencing that day. As far as social well-being, introducing something like group activities could help students improve socially within the music space. And an example of that could be something like collaborative songwriting, having them get together and write small songs together. And as something that I looked at, something called participatory music, which an example of that would be getting the class together, having them sit in a circle, and you take a beginner song, like a lot of musicians might recognize something like Hot Cross Buns, taking a very simple song like that might be a bit boring, and adding things like harmony, improv, movement, anything that a student feels they can bring to the table. Next theme is motivation. Sometimes it's really hard to get students to practice. And a way that something that could help that is by allowing them to have their own hours controlled by them, working with students, discussing with them their personal priorities so they can fit in practice without the stress of having to cram everything in. And another way to inspire them to practice would be to have sectional rehearsals, for example, having all the trumpets practice together or having all of one voice part practice together, give them a real sense of community and inspire them to practice more because they have other instrumentalists or musicians that kind of are having the same experience together. And also offering feedback to students, offering their strengths and weaknesses so they know where to improve and they also know that they're getting stronger. And also motivation to grow in itself. It would be most useful for students to have a growth mindset. So in a growth mindset, students embrace challenges, persist in the face of setbacks, see effort as a path to mastery, learn from criticism, and find lessons and inspiration in the success of others. So in order to develop this growth mindset, it would be smart to maybe give them challenging but attainable goals. So they know that there is an easy way to get through the challenges, but they're still challenging enough that they can grow from them. And my last theme here is relevance, which kind of means allowing students to say, hey, what does music education have to do with my life? Why am I learning this? And a way for them to feel like music is more relevant in their lives would be to survey them, maybe see what types of ensembles they want to see either extracurricularly or as a course. Also, another example would be using modern instruments to perform simple songs in the classroom, expanding on the curriculum, adding a bit more to that. Also, careful selection of performance pieces, making sure that every student is properly represented in the classroom. And also, this is a fun one, outside interaction. Field trips, taking students to outside performances, especially if they align with the curriculum, can really make them see how music education is important in their own lives. So getting to this booklet, so this is the cover of it, and this QR code here will take you to an overview video, which basically explains all of the contents of the book. And it's not opening. I'm not going to waste time on that. But basically, it's all this information here. So this is the cover of the booklet. I have copyright information in it, introduction, abstract, research, discussion, conclusion, and a back cover with all of my references that were used for the book specifically. And this is the main part of the booklet. So it's basically a lot of what I just discussed with you today. It's divided into 3 columns. So if you are a music educator, just having this in your desk, pulling it out as a quick resource, you see, oh, my students are really stressed. What could I do to help them? And these are just suggestions for music educators to see what they might want to use in their own classrooms. I have all the sections here, color-coded, and well-being is divided into 2, but you see that dotted line there. So it shows that it is still one theme that emerged from the research. So here's my conclusion. Takeaways. I did not think that a little booklet like this, it's only a few pages, would count as honors work. But the amount of work that was put into it, it definitely shows between content, formatting, a lot of work went into this sort of thing, and also just condensing it down into an easy resource for music educators was a bit challenging as well, but also super, super rewarding. But also, I would love to close with the fact that I think this could be a really nice way for music educators to help out their students and to help music education become more impactful in their lives. And lastly, I just want to thank you all for listening to my presentation today. Thank you to Dean Ross and the Honor School, and also Dean Mezzi for being here today. Thank you. And a huge, huge thank you to my first reader, Dr. Jonathan McElroy. He was a huge help in this, and I could not have done this without him. Thank you. Any questions? Don't be shy. Hi, yes.
Are you going to post this booklet online? Like, how would you get this to music education?
So originally, if I were to consider distributing this to music educators, I would start small. So locally around the area, I would probably also distribute this to my own high school, starting off that way. And then if it were to kind of grow, I would consider making it into a digital PDF format, something that's a bit more transportable and easy to access. Yes?
So I guess your experience is if a lot of your research is about how to motivate students studying music, I guess they're coming to music class, which is voluntary, right?
Yes.
And they, even though they have an interest in it, they still, you see that their motivation flags, or is that where you're coming from? That is, even though one would think somebody would be going into a music program with enthusiasm and dedication, your experience is that sort of falters. Is that right?
Well, it's more of like looking at student experiences and seeing how music education could be more relevant and beneficial to them, especially seeing curriculums that are like, oh, we're learning this like huge orchestra piece, how can I really connect with this, or how can I be motivated to practice this? And having those kind of methods that I explained in the booklet kind of help with getting students to see how music education can impact their lives and just increasing their willingness to learn. Yes.
So, Elaine, I'm so glad to see this come to fruition. And as you know, we've had conversations. Music was such an important part of my life and my children's life, and so many people. So thank you for putting this out there. You started your presentation out by talking about how schools are often cutting education. Like they are one of the first, music education, art education. They are often the first things to go when budgets are cut or whatever. I'm just wondering if you see some of those sort of for those, you know, the well-being and the motivation. Do you see your booklet and the information, and particularly the work that you did in 396, as relevant to convincing public school and private school administrations not to cut programs? Is there a correlation between how to motivate students, which seems to be your primary focus here in the booklet, to the original question that you sort of posed, which is how do we prevent these programs from being cut from the beginning?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if administrators see effort from students and see that they're excited to learn about music, then it could definitely help with not getting those programs cut. That was definitely like a main motivator for me starting the research in the first place, kind of noticing that music, sometimes it's the first to go, and that's a really unfortunate thing, but I would hope that with my resource, it could help make music education a bit stronger, and maybe we'll see less music programs being cut in that way. Thank you so much.
Very nicely done. As Elena alluded to, they have a lot of information, and I think the last challenge that we give them is that they have to condense all of that into this 8-minute presentation. That's a lot that they attempt to cover. Our next presenter is Charlotte Edwards, an English major with a concentration in creative writing. She did her work with first reader Dr. Kenneth Womack and second reader Dr. Frank Fury.
Hi everyone, my name is Charlotte Edwards and I am a second semester senior at Monmouth majoring in English with a concentration in creative writing. For my project, I decided to complete a creative capstone and to complete my passion for creative writing with my personal experiences to develop a memoir ranging from the year 2011 to 2023 about navigating my relationship with my distant father. And before I begin, I would like to thank the Honor School, particularly Dean Ross and Doris Meyer, for putting together this event and also for creating such an inclusive and such a rewarding environment that supports the growth of all students' academic and personal pursuits. And I would also like to express my sincere and profound gratitude to my first reader, Dr. Womack, and my second reader, Dr. Fury, for your unwavering guidance, mentorship, and motivation throughout every phase of this process. This project truly would not be possible without you both, and I am so grateful to have had the opportunity to work with both of you so closely throughout the last year and a half. So the main research question for my project was, how do the events of separation and divorce and distant or estranged parent-child relationships affect children's social and emotional development, and how do children seek and achieve catharsis in these relationships and reclaim their identity and autonomy both within and beyond these bondages? So when I initially began to workshop different ideas for this project, this topic personally resonated with me as my parents divorced in 2011. I'm an only child, and when I was younger, I remember having a close relationship with both of my parents. And I also remember having the underlying fear that something would happen to cause a severance in what seemed to be our ideal family unit. And in 2011, this fear became a striking reality when my mom sat me down and told me that my parents were filing for divorce. My dad remarried to my stepmom, and I had my 3 younger half-siblings. And throughout the years since the divorce, the emotional distance between my dad and I gradually grew, even though I continued to see him every couple of weeks when he came to visit. But that disconnection became most palpable upon unexpectedly learning of my dad's plans to move to Spain in May of 2020 for my half-siblings. And over the following 2 years, our communication became limited to sporadic email exchanges every couple of months. Another fact about my dad is that he is an avid Star Wars fan, and during the summer 2022 term, I took a Star Wars themed class as a requirement for my minor, which was my first full and in-depth encounter with the film collection, and it was also the summer when I rekindled communication with my dad again. And with each film that we viewed and discussed during the course, I remember becoming the most engrossed within Darth Vader's multifaceted characterization and in the development of his relationship with his son, Luke Skywalker, throughout the first trilogy. And I kind of saw parallels between my relationship with my dad and also their dynamic too. So with that, this intersection catalyzed the fruition of the running metaphor for the memoir, Anakin Skywalker, also known as Darth Vader's transformation from human to machine, along with the different themes that were used to frame each chapter for the memoir, including attachment, identity, choice, hope, and the situational mask, to seek a better understanding of the ties that I share with my dad, and to discover a newfound clarity in each of our roles, both within and beyond our relationship. So after reviewing a diverse range of scholarship and also different published memoirs, for example, Abandon Me by Melissa Febos and also The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls, these were the main buckets that I came upon after synthesizing the main points. For example, divorce as depicted in film and popular culture, the role of the father in popular culture, implications of literal and metaphorical blindness in storytelling, the role of the stepmother in popular culture, cognitive and psychological impact on children, and also being candid in creative nonfiction. And after synthesizing these main points, this was what led to the construction of the metaphor, or of the memoir. And today I will be reading an excerpt from one of those chapters. It most likely will be the first chapter. I plan to start to apply the technique of in media res, which is kind of starting with the inciting force and then circling back to past events to show the evolution. And this chapter means a lot to me. When I was working on it, one of the main buckets I used from my literature review was I became really fascinated with the idea of both literal and also metaphorical blindness within each of the characters. And I wanted to see within this chapter how that would apply to both Darth Vader's literal blindness by the mask that he wears within the series, and also how, what are the implications of the metaphorical blindness that he experiences by both the prescribed and the programmable set of norms that he is quite literally encased in throughout the series. So with that, I will be reading the first page and a half from Plans for the New Death Star. My Darth Vader always wanted autonomy. He tried to indoctrinate himself and everyone around him with the belief that he was in favor of a balanced order and alliance, that he had a strong loathing towards authoritarianism. But this was another lie in his cycle of self-deceit. He craved power, superiority, and an all-dominating governance that made him feel like he was worth something. He became obsessed with the desire to reclaim his strength that crumbled to the ground with the rest of his empire, by the once burning force within him. This led him to lay the groundwork for the plan to build the new Death Star. It was about 2 months following the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in late May of 2020 when I first learned that my dad was moving to Spain. We were in the thick of the quarantine when everyone entered into a sea of hysteria over the toilet paper shortages, and we were wiping down the delivered groceries with Windex as per CDC orders, and I was approaching the end of the spring semester of sophomore year. I spent most of my days completing coursework in my bedroom-turned classroom, watching and then rewatching episodes of Gilmore Girls, trying new dessert recipes for my baking Instagram account, going on laps around the development at Millwood Farms with my dog Tootsie, and helping my mom and Nana prepare the house that I spent 20 years growing up in to be put on the market. The last time that I saw my dad in person was back in early December when he met my mom and me at Linggoth Hall at Fairfield University to help us move me out of my dorm room. He thought that I was homesick and wanted to transfer to a school that was closer to home, which was partially the truth. What he didn't know was that I had just left from a meeting with the dean after receiving news that I had just failed out of college. Though my Darth Vader wore a mask that hid his face from humanity, or shielded humanity from his face, I remembered the way that his nose scrunched and how the color of his eyes transformed from a vibrant pine green to a dull metal gray whenever he disapproved of something or someone. I convinced myself that this tendency was more endearing than self-righteous, and it was his effort to compensate for 10 years of being emotionally absent, and he wanted to fulfill his paternal prophecy, despite whether or not it aligned with my fantastical depiction of the father. As much as I forced myself to believe this facade, and as badly as I wanted to open up about how upset that I was for deviating from my original plan to major in public health, even though I absolutely dreaded it, and how I was marinating in defeat because I lacked the motivation to complete my assignments, I just couldn't. He tried to remain indifferent, like he comprised an immunity to feeling any form of judgment, even if he disagreed. But I remembered his eyes, telescopic eyes, for they were a mirror to mine, and I knew that he would not be able to secrete his censor if I disclosed the real cost for me leaving Fairfield, and that it would have given him another reason to insist that I was taking the easy way out of life. So I put my own mask on whenever the subject came up. Thank you so much. At this time, I will also be taking questions. Yes.
I'm kind of curious if you could say a little more about the metaphor, which is so wonderful. When someone is contemplating blowing up their sort of family life, right? They kind of are inventing the Death Star plans. So it's this wonderful metaphor for the way people behave in those situations. You know, he had to at some point have been marching around with this secret in his mind. I wonder if you could share a couple of more examples of how the Star Wars metaphor might play out as you explore this story in your metaphor.
Absolutely.
In your memoir.
Absolutely. So one thing that I really want to continue to explore throughout the duration of the memoir, I plan to go back in time and also kind of learn a little bit more, kind of similar to the prequel series when we learn about Anakin Skywalker's transformation from human to machine, and how he's taken in by the Jedi Order and how he's trained to be the greatest Jedi Master, as he is told that he's the chosen one. And I kind of want to do the same thing, or implement that same structure with my memoir and go back in time and really get to learn more about my dad's character, and kind of see if, or the different masks that he put on and the different spaces that he was in. One topic that I became really interested in when I was doing my research was the concept of the literal and the physical spaces that the characters occupy, both with, and how that kind of influences the different types of identities that they subscribe or unsubscribe to. So I definitely want to continue exploring that to kind of see which identity does, not only does Darth Vader, but also does my dad assume that most closely aligns with his authentic self, and to what point, or kind of to identify like what that turning point will be for him to embrace his authentic self, even if that means going against the set of norms or going against the set of expectations around him. Yes.
Charlotte, I really was moved by the reading, especially the candor of your reading. And I was thinking during it back to the one of the first slides you put up, saying that you were looking into lots of the depiction of divorce in popular culture and the effect on families. And I wonder if ultimately you choose to mediate your own experience with a setting that's a long time ago in a galaxy far away, to hold it kind of further out from these sort of immediate depictions of divorce around your own age group and your own milieu in the United States of America in the 21st century in novels or films. Is that because that stuff that's closer at hand and more literal depiction of scenarios, is it because the maps of behavior they show are inadequate, you think, or not comforting, and not instructive? Is that why it's better to get farther away?
That was something that I explored a lot when I was reading different articles. And one thing that they talked about was, in a lot of modern adaptations of different films that deal with the topics of divorce and separation, that they tend to frame them as remarriage comedies, and they tend to depict them in a more comedic and less serious sense. And even though Darth Vader isn't necessarily a divorce film per se, it's one thing that I was really moved by is the really honest relationship between Darth Vader and also Luke Skywalker, and their genuine struggles, and how Darth Vader, they had that connection, but it was hard for them to bring that together because of that emotional distance and because of the different spaces that they occupied. So that's something that I want to continue to explore, and I want to see kind of like the different interpretations of that storyline within the creation of more films and even more TV shows too, to kind of see like the nature in which they're depicted. But
It has a lot of general applicability to topics, so
Definitely.
Good luck with continuing it.
thank you so much.
I just have a comment, and then we'll thank you for your presentation. I love when students share their creative work, and as a writer, one of the hardest things I think you can do is read your own work, so thank you for doing so and doing that today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charlotte. Charlotte addresses one of the early questions I had about the honors thesis process. I said, why on earth, if I'm going to do a creative project, because I would do something very similar to what Charlotte did, which is do a creative writing piece, why would I have to do all that research? And I think you exhibited very well why that research is important and why we have our creative writers and our creative projects go through that research process. So thank you. Our next presenter, Hannah Vozo, who is an English major, doing her work with first reader Dr. Frank Fury and her second reader Dr. Courtney Werner.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah. And so before I start, I just want to say a brief thank you to the former Dean of the Honor School, Dean Mezzi, the current Dean, Dean Ross, and Doris Myers, for putting together the Honors Research Conference and creating spaces where students can pursue both academic and creative projects through these theses and capstones. So today, I'm presenting my library research thesis, which I conducted in the form of a literature review titled Analyzing the Intersectional Identities of Racially Gray Characters in a Black and White World, a literature review exploring scholarship on Nella Larsen's Passing and Quicksand. So Nella Larsen, as pictured here on the cover of Passing, is an American novelist who wrote about the Black experience in America during the late 1920s and early 1930s. And her work primarily explores the physical and psychological tolls of racism and its impact on identity. So before I get into my research, I just want to briefly summarize the novel so you guys have a bit of context in case you haven't read them. So published in 1928, Quicksand is about a biracial woman named Helga who is searching for a place where she belongs. Due to segregation in each environment, she identifies with either her Black or white identity, repressing the other to fit in. And while she always initially feels happy, as time goes on, she feels the internal dissidence caused by repressing a part of herself. And so then published only a year later in 1929, Passing is about the phenomenon of women of color passing as white. So the story follows two childhood friends, Irene and Claire. Claire is a biracial woman who leaves her Black identity behind when she marries a white man, concealing her racial heritage. And Irene, while sometimes passing as white, identifies as an African-American woman and describes herself as a race woman dedicated to uplifting the Black community. So upon meeting again after a long time, these women become interested in each other's lives, simultaneously criticizing and fantasizing about how the other views race. So, however, as their worlds further intertwine, they begin to realize that there's nothing they wouldn't do to maintain their perfectly crafted lives. So both stories essentially explore the themes of identity and belonging through questioning preconceived notions of race, gender, and class. And so my thesis examines these concepts of identity and belonging in Larsen's novels to answer the research question, what can readers understand about the female protagonist when reading Quicksand and Passing through a lens of intersectionality? So to educate myself on the existing conversation regarding how these themes operate in the novels, I reviewed a substantial body of scholarship, including literary criticism and theory-based sources. And so after reviewing this previously written literature, I synthesized three important themes that I'm going to discuss with you guys today. So the first theme is the importance of viewing the characters through a lens of intersectionality. So intersectionality is essentially an analytical framework that helps people understand how a person's identities, and you can see here an example of some different identity categories, come together to influence the way a person experiences the world. So Kimberly Crenshaw coined this theory in 1989 to bring awareness to the fact that Black women's struggles were largely being left out of anti-sexist and anti-racist legislation and social movements because of the unique intersection between their gender and race. So she further explains this using the DeGraff and Reed versus General Motors case example. And so five African-American women went to a court in Missouri claiming that General Motors discriminated against Black women. And the courts ultimately sided with General Motors because they found that they hired white women, so they weren't sexist, and they hired Black men, so they weren't racist. But Crenshaw uses this example to show how the courts failed to realize that the unique experience of discrimination these women were experiencing was because of the intersection of their gender and race. So I found that while not always naming the theory directly, a lot of the scholars touched on the fundamental elements of intersectionality, specifically discussing the intersections between race, class, gender, and sexuality. And this led me to conclude that analyzing Irene, Claire, and Helga through a lens of intersectionality allows readers to better understand how their social identities combine to create this unique sense of oppression and discrimination. So then the second theme I looked at is that the female protagonists struggle with simultaneously achieving a personally fulfilling identity with a socially validated sense of belonging. So the existing body of scholarship demonstrates how Helga, Irene, and Claire all sacrifice their personal happiness to perform these identities that are largely based on stereotypes and social standards to fit in with those around them. So for instance, in Quicksand, since Helga's biracial background is frowned upon, she works hard to create a socially appealing image of herself depending on the environment she inhabits. And so when she's in Copenhagen with her white relatives, she's encouraged to take on this very stereotypical sexualized exotic role, which dehumanizes her and makes her feel like an object rather than a person. So essentially, in the end, all these female characters find that societal acceptance and a sense of belonging do not necessarily amount to self-acceptance, happiness, or a sense of identity. And so the third theme that I looked at was the novel's depictions of social binaries, social standards, and stereotypes, and how they present a critique of the racial politics of the time. So legally and socially enforced, the racial politics in the novels are defined in ways that maintain a racial binary. And so most things in life exist in opposition to something else, and so each side of that binary reflects its status through social standards and stereotypes. So with the existence of things like segregation legislation and strategic essentialism, both Black and white Americans policed a very strict social and political construction of race that creates this racial binary that didn't really account for the intermediate state that Larson's female characters occupy. So I will be further expanding on this research next semester, as I'll be doing an English departmental honors research thesis. And so reading the novels through a lens of intersectionality, I will argue that although Irene, Claire, and Helga experience the world via different racial identities, they exist on the same plane, inhabiting a racially gray space in a Black and white world. So I use the term racially gray here to describe the tensions that appear when analyzing the characters' similar struggles due to their distinct racial identities, to simultaneously establish that personally gratifying identity that I mentioned and the socially acknowledged status of belonging. So I employ the term racially gray rather than racially ambiguous because the term racial ambiguity refers to the external appearance, but I wanted to incorporate that key internal ambiguity that characters like, for instance, Helga experiences, as she's a biracial woman, but when people look at her, they consider her an African-American woman. And throughout the entire story, it goes through her internal tensions because she wants to be considered both a Black and white woman. And so I just wanted to use the term racially gray to incorporate that internal and external ambiguity that I felt that the term racially ambiguous did not cover. So yes, thank you guys for listening. And before we move on to questions, I just want to say one last but not least thank you to my first and second readers, Dr. Fury and Dr. Werner. Thank you guys so much for all your brilliant support and guidance throughout this entire process. I really couldn't have done it without you. So does anybody have any questions? Yes?
So without giving away the ending
Mm-hmm.
for passing, would you say that the ending and its ambiguity
Mm-hmm.
makes the author Larson very pessimistic about how different views of which world to be in? Is she very pessimistic about that, would you say?
Okay, so that ending is fantastic, so I really won't give it away because I hope you guys will read the novels. But I wouldn't say necessarily, it's kind of a shocking ending. I would say you can look at it that she maybe is pessimistic because it's very sad ending, but I tend to look at it as both of her novels explore these concepts, specifically race, through a very open lens and kind of just present how she sees the world or how the world is at that time. So I wouldn't necessarily call it pessimistic. I would more call it maybe eye-opening, and she kind of just wants to spread awareness. Thank you. Yes.
So, it's interesting to me. So you took a really complicated and, important theory of intersectionality, which was developed in the 1980s-ish, and applied it to the 1920s writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, so I love the sort of going back and looking historically, and I'm also wondering whether there are themes that you addressed in your research and in analyzing these books that might help us now, in 2020, almost forward, have conversations around race and identity real disconnectedness that I think we're experiencing in this country right now. The whole idea of critical race theory,
Right.
and we can't even who's woke and who's not.
Right.
Does your research at all, could that be applied in any way to sort of, or to help us muddle through this conversation?
Yes, I definitely think it can be, because I didn't mention this, but I think one of the things that is often misconstrued about intersectionality is that although Kimberly Crenshaw coined the theory to talk specifically about African American women's experiences, and although I am also talking about that here, intersectionality is a theory that can be applied and should be applied to everyone's identity. It's important to understand how every one of us as people, how all of the identities that we have that make up who we are come together to create unique experiences for all of us, whether that be beneficial experiences or disadvantages because of our identities. So I think that if we kind of applied that theory more to maybe, as you said, what's going on today, and there's a very volatile environment especially, I think that that would be very beneficial to help understand each other and how other people experience the world. Thank you.
Nicely done, and a great look at literature and the ways that literature is a great reflection of a lot of what happens in the world and everything else. It's awesome that you're going to explore that more fully of your honors departmental thesis, even better. Our final presentation of this session is Nicole Mautone, an English major, who will be presenting her research under first reader Dr. Stanley Blair.
Hi, I'm Nicole. So my topic is Expectations and Subversions, the Semiotics of Psychological Horror in Doki Doki Literature Club. So psychological horror is a genre used in various media. Usually audiences know what to expect. However, this is not really the case in Doki Doki Literature Club, or DDLC, a visual novel which is marketed as an anime-style dating simulation, and what it is for about 4.5 hours. The dating sim builds expectations for this time, creating a false sense of security. However, then something more sinister appears to be at work for about a period of 12 minutes, when a major disturbance subverts dating sim expectations, creating psychological horror and unsettling the user for the rest of the visual novel. This thesis examines these 12 minutes of DDLC through semiotics, analyzing 3 sign systems, auditory, written language, and visual, to understand how each system works independently but also collaboratively to create the visual novel psychological horror. Okay, so what the heck does that all mean? What is a visual novel? What is semiotics? I'm aware the source material is a little out there, but I'm asking you to stick with me. Let's break it down. First things first, what is a visual novel? A visual novel isn't quite a video game, and despite its name, it isn't quite a novel either. But it has attributes of both, namely qualities we associate with video games, like sound, music, and visuals, as well as written language like a novel. But visual novels lack such free reign and actual gameplay of a video game, and they obviously have extra elements than just a novel has. Visual novels typically use a single keyboard key to advance the narrative, similar to the turning of a page in a printed novel, and the plot is fairly limited, so no side quests. While the written language moves the narrative along the most, the writing still must be paired with the auditory and visual elements for the narrative to be completely experienced. Also, visual novels were originated in Japan, which is why most of them have the anime art style, even those not created in Japan, like this one. Now, another keyword I have to define is semiotics. I mentioned that my thesis is a semiotic analysis, but what does that mean? Well, semiotics is the study of signs and sign systems. A sign is made up of a signifier and a signified. The signifier is a thing, an item that we perceive or read, so a drawing, a word, a sound, a photo. The signified is the idea or meaning that we associate with that signifier. A good example to understand this is a stop sign, so thanks to Dr. Blair for the analogy. Most road signs include 3 sign systems: color, shape, and text. For a stop sign, the color red, the octagon shape, and the English word stop are the signifiers. Each of these signify that the driver should stop. They all work together and redundantly to make this message completely clear, so that if one sign system were missing, a red octagonal stop sign with no text, we would likely still stop. Although there is an absence in one sign system, the other 2 are still working. So what does this all have to do with my thesis? Well, as I have said, DDLC presents itself as a dating simulator for at least 4.5 hours. These are the 4 characters you interact with in the visual novel. So from left to right. This is your best friend Sayori, who makes you join a literature club at school and introduces you to the other 3 girls: Yuri, Monica, which is the president of the literature club, and Natsuki. Sayori, Yuri, and Natsuki are your possible love interests in the dating sim. However, spoiler alert, by the end of the game, each of these girls is killed off, and we learn that Monika here is being controlled by a sentient artificial intelligence who is the killer, and has become obsessed with the user. And as we can see here, AI Monika does end up getting you all to herself. My thesis grapples with the time in between and the small semiotic changes that change a visual novel from this, a dating sim, to this, psychological horror. Now here is DDLC in action. For the text to change and the plot to advance, the user must press any key on their keyboard, usually the space bar, and the plot advances. Small changes might align with these text changes, like character stances, but it's mostly the text that tells the story. As you can see, there is no dynamic movement. Neither the characters nor the main character moves, except for the characters jump cutting from one stance to another. Now let's break down what we're seeing semiotically. The dating sim creates user expectations in 3 sign systems: auditory, visual, and written language. The background music, DDLC's main theme, is often on loop. A background image establishes setting. The character images are colorful, specifically the character's distinctive hair and eye colors. Text only occurs in the text box and is of a consistent font and color. All of these sign systems actively work together to create the dating sim and the expectation that they will continue. Now, my thesis focuses on the 12-minute portion, which starts here. And what do we notice right away? Silence. Now, this might be odd, right? Now let's think about the stop sign. If we see a stop sign, maybe with 2 correct attributes, red and octagon, but with no text, we may think it's weird, but then stop is normal, because although it is weird, the other 2 sign systems are still present. Similarly, despite the absence of music, the visual novel still has images and written text, and therefore is still working under dating sim expectations. For context, what is happening here is that the main character is waiting to walk to school with Sayori, but she's late, so he decides to walk to school alone. When he gets there, he meets Monika, who is setting up for a club fair that's supposed to happen later in the day, and she says this to him about Sayori. You kind of left her hanging this morning, you know? Keep that in mind, it'll be important in like 5 seconds. For the sake of, so the main character races back to Sayori's home to go wake her up. We see several background changes from the school hallway to the street that we saw before that Sayori and the main character live on, to the outside of Sayori's home. But then when the main character enters Sayori's home, we lose another sign system. Now, we only have 1 sign system working under dating sim expectations, and I'm going to pause it here, because it is after this that the dating sim expectations are completely shattered. When the main character opens the door, he opens it to Sayori's hanging body. This is where Monika's comment comes into play. She was aware that Sayori was hanging. Now, as main character views Sayori's lifeless body, all sign systems do return, but in inverted and subverted ways. The expectations built up for over 4 hours are subverted, which is what my thesis discusses. Many glitches happen rapidly, with only Sayori's body staying in the frame. This moment subverts all dating sim expectations by subverting all of the sign systems. Now, for the sake of brevity, I'm going to focus on only one glitch. And to be clear, this is not a real glitch. It is planned, it's part of the visual novel, but for a first-time player, it may appear to be a real glitch in the visual novel. The obvious distressing image is Sayori hanging, but let's look deeper. We lose a background. And I'm gonna pause this now because you get the idea. But we lose a background. All visuals and colors we are used to are gone. The auditory sign system returns, but it is in a distorted version of the music you heard earlier. And the most jarring of all is that there is now text in the visual pane, somewhere we have never seen it before. Text has always been sequestered to the text box, but now it is behind Sayori and in a completely different font and color. And more, the text directs the user to leave the program and look at the file that was downloaded when the main game file was downloaded. If you do navigate to that file and through the coding language inside to the line it directs you to, the coding language includes full sentences from Monika about getting rid of Sayori, as if Monika is directly messing with the coding of the game. This is a way that the sign system's expectations are subverted. And psychological horror is formed, not only because of the disturbing imagery, but also because now you may think that something is hacking the files in your computer, a personal fear of mine. The visual novel actually attempts to reboot after this, except Sayori is removed. Other glitches and subversions occur, but the dating sim is ultimately restored for the time being. But because of this major subversion, the user is always going to be uneasy, unsure of if and when the next major disturbance will occur. So, in conclusion, this thesis examines a portion of DDLC through semiotics by analyzing 3 sign systems, auditory, written language, and visual, to understand how each works independently but also collaboratively to create the visual novel psychological horror. Often the subversion of dating sim expectations occurs through selective subtraction and/or distortion of the individual sign systems. And while there are obvious horrific images in the visual novel, it's really these subversions that creates the true horror. I hope after this presentation I've effectively explained what this means and how I did it. And a quick thank you to Dr. Blair for being my advisor and helping me every step of the way. Thank you to my parents who heard about every struggle and edit. Thank you to the Honor School for giving me this opportunity, and thank you all for listening. So I guess questions, if, yeah. Yes, yeah.
A really interesting paper. I'm really curious, and I thought effective application of semiotics. I'm interested in who the intended audience is for the product itself. Are people who seek out this visual novel looking already in a horror category, or are they naive?
Yeah, well, it started, when it initially came out, it was advertised as a dating sim. If you go to the webpage, which is in my paper, like I have a photo, it's all dating sim expectations. Everything's fine, you can download the file. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a warning that's like, this may not be suitable for children or like sensitive audiences. But it's like, you won't even see it if you just click on the file when you're downloading. As time went on, a lot of I know gaming YouTubers started playing it, so it became popular and known as a psychological horror novel. But yeah, it started as people were shocked. And again, you play 4.5 hours of just clicking and dating these girls, and then yeah, so it's disturbing. Yeah.
How did you find this concept of a visual novel and this particular visual novel? How did that come about?
Great question. Maybe 1.5 years ago, I took What is a Book with Dr. Blair, and it basically focused on we were given graphic novels and visual novels, and asked is this literature? Is this still literature? And so my paper focused on actually for that class the semiotics of this 12-minute portion, but it was less beefy. I think I beefed it up a little. But yeah, I would have never known about this otherwise. So yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Wonderful, wonderful job. Congratulations to our presenters today. You can officially take a sigh of relief. You have finished your honors thesis. Congratulations and a wonderful job on all the work you've done. Thank you all for coming today. Please feel free to head next door. We have some coffee if you want to take some photos before you leave. If you're sticking around for our next session, it will be in about 10 minutes or so. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for coming this afternoon.